Praise the Lord, everyone. Brother Roop here. Every Christmas that comes along, people bring up the census. Why did they have to travel to register for the census? Joseph and Mary had to travel from Nazareth, which was north of Samaria, in the middle of Israel, down to just outside Jerusalem to Bethlehem. And that's because they had to register in the house of their fathers. And the house of the fathers for both Mary and Joseph was David, King David. So Joseph and Mary had to travel to Bethlehem, which was about in a straight line 70 miles. But it was customary for Jews not to go through Samaria because there was a lot of bandits in Samaria. That's because the Jews and Samaritans had hard feelings with one another. The Jews were kind of snobbish to the Samaritans because they weren't 100% Jews. The Samaritans kind of resented that, and there was a lot of robberies that took place if Jews went through there. It was kind of dangerous. So probably Joseph and Mary probably went around Samaria, as most Jews did. That would have made the trip about 90 miles. So now it's 90 miles up and down hills on dirt roads. On a mule. Joseph probably walked. Mary rode on the mule. Now, Mary was 9 months pregnant. If not 9 months, at least 8 months pregnant. She was big with child. And Joseph and Mary, just a little tidbit, Joseph and Mary weren't married yet. So that technically made Mary a single mother. So they were espoused, but not married. So that's a little something. So they had to travel to Bethlehem, which was the hometown of King David. Now, all the Jews knew who the ancestors was. It was very, very important for Jews to know their ancestry, their tribe, their family, and their clans. And it was important to know where you came from. Both Mary and Joseph were from the house of David, meaning that their lineage went through King David. That's why the genealogies are listed in the Gospels. One genealogy is for Joseph and one's for Mary. And it proves that both Mary and Joseph came through David, the line of David. It was important for the Jewish people to know their ancestries. Paul, the Apostle Paul, in Romans chapter 11, verse 1 says, "For I am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin." To the Jewish people, genealogies were very important. Among other things, the birthright given to the firstborn son involved a double inheritance. Family leadership, vocational opportunities, and land ownership. That's why genealogies was found throughout the Old Testament, and certainly too in the Gospels. The genealogies were kept public record, as first century Jewish historian Josephus wrote, "This I have set down the genealogy of my family, as I have found in the public records." So that shows that the Jews had public records in every town. and especially in the temple. They had public records of where everybody's ancestry, genealogy went through. Why was that important? It was important for a lot of reasons. Probably the most important is they wanted to know who the rightful king of Israel is, and they were trying to predict when the Messiah would be born and who he was. Because the Messiah would be born through the lineage of King David. So Joseph and Mary went to Bethlehem, where that's their ancestry town. And why was Bethlehem so important? Well, King David, when he was alive back in the day, owned all that land. That was his family's land around Bethlehem. And when he was dying, he donated that land to the temple for one specific reason: to raise sacrificial animals for the temple service, especially these sacrificial lambs. When the temple sold animals for sacrifice on the temple grounds, those animals came from around Bethlehem, because that land was set aside by King David to raise sacrificial animals, especially sacrificial lambs. Well, why did Jesus be born in Bethlehem? Had to be born in Bethlehem. Well, because Jesus was going to be the ultimate sacrificial lamb for humanity. So he needed to be in a place where they raised sacrificial lambs, because he would be the ultimate sacrificial lamb for mankind. Also, if you remember, angels appeared to shepherds outside of Bethlehem. Why is that? And they were singing and praising God about the birth of Jesus Christ. Those shepherds weren't just ordinary shepherds. Those shepherds outside Bethlehem were the shepherds who raised sacrificial lambs in that area. They tended the sheep's flocks and made sure that the lambs were without spot or blemish. They were raised carefully and stored carefully and tended carefully, so they were without spot or blemish, so they could be sacrificed in the temple. Well, when Jesus was born, he was our sacrificial lamb. So the shepherds had to be notified. The shepherds had to be present, because they were the ones who shepherded sacrificial lambs. Plus, Jesus Christ would be the great shepherd. So the genealogies and the census brought Jesus to Bethlehem, where he needed to be born. And the genealogies in the Gospels without a doubt, proves that Joseph and Mary descended from King David. In fact, as Josephus said, and every Jewish scholar would testify, the Jews kept records of genealogies in the temple and in the towns, especially in the temple. If the priest wanted to know who the Messiah was, or who the rightful king of Israel should have been if the Romans weren't there, they could have looked that information up in their own records. In fact, I have no doubt that in secret they did. They did. I have no doubt in secret they knew who the rightful king was. It was Joseph from Nazareth. I mean, how could you not look that information up? I mean, if I was a priest, that would be the first thing I look up. So, with the Romans in charge, you couldn't let that information be free. You couldn't let that information get out there because the Romans would probably see that as a threat and kill the lineage of David. So the priest probably knew in secret who the rightful king of Israel was. That was Joseph of Nazareth. And when Jesus was born, it was him. So have you ever wondered why Pontius Pilate wrote King of the Jews on the cross of Jesus? He wrote King of the Jews. He said, here's your king. Pontius Pilate and the priests probably knew that Jesus was the rightful king of Israel. They probably knew he was the Messiah as well. But see, they were more concerned about politics, more concerned about their jobs, their paychecks, their pensions. But in secret, I'm sure the talk was who the king of Israel was. I'm sure Pontius Pilate probably caught wind. And that's why he wrote King of the Jews on top. That's probably why they made the priests so mad about that. Because Jesus was the rightful heir to the throne of Israel. Now, why was genealogies and the census and all that so important? Because it's a written record proving that Jesus Christ was the Messiah and the rightful king of Israel. See, in 70 AD, the Romans conquered Jerusalem, killed about 1 million Jews. It was a tremendous Holocaust. Imagine 1 million people being killed today. It was more horrific back then when population was much smaller. But when Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans, the temple was burned and dismantled and destroyed by the Romans. And all the records were all destroyed. All the records were destroyed of genealogies and ancestries. And over time, when the Jews were dispersed, they lost track of who their ancestry went through. Today, Jews cannot prove who their father was, the house of their father, who their ancestries went through. They can't prove that past 70 AD because all the records were destroyed. Maybe they have family legends or family lore that says, hey, we're Levites, or hey, we're uh, Benjaminites, but they can't prove it. No Jew can prove his ancestry past 70 AD. So the Jews today are waiting for the Messiah, but they cannot prove who he is. They cannot prove who he is. If somebody says, hey, I'm the Messiah in Israel, they can't prove it through the records. But they can prove that Jesus Christ was because of the genealogies that we have in the Gospels. And the census, of course, was very important symbolically because Jesus was our sacrificial lamb, and he needed to be born in the ancestry of David, where now they did raise sacrificial lambs back in that day. So that was all. That's why the genealogies and the census was so important, and that's why it's in scriptures today. If you have any comments, put them in the comment section. Thank you for listening. God bless you.